Nigel Farage needs no introduction. He's our mate in the United Kingdom, of course, the leader of the Reform Party and a parliamentarian now, of course, after the most recent UK election. Nigel, lovely to see you. Also good to see you back on GB News as well. But I've got to ask you, one of the things that you reiterated at almost every rally when you were in the lead up to the election was that you had purged political parties of the far right, that you had gone hard against all of these people, yet amazingly and unsurprisingly, despite your proven track record of doing that, the media is trying to pull you into the worst elements of what we've been seeing in the past few days.
Yes, it's been despicable. I mean, broadcasters saying these are Farage's riots, prominent Labour politicians. This is what Nigel Farage wanted. As if somehow I'm responsible, some even suggesting that I'm orchestrating the riots. I've spent 30 years fighting elections, believing that is the way to solve problems in society, not to resort to violence. I've never gone anywhere near I wouldn't touch with a bargepole. Members of the extreme right who say very provocative things like Tommy Robinson or the others, the reason they hate me, the reason they're blaming me is twofold. The first is the Labour Party are terrified that many of their own voters will vote for me, because when Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, says everything that's happening is the fault of the far right, well, yes, of course, there are some far right thugs behaving appallingly, but actually, when it comes to being concerned about mass immigration, when it comes to being concerned about societal breakdown, when it comes to being worried that many of our towns and cities are no longer recognisable as even being English, if you use that term far right, you're using it against your own voters and a majority of the population. That's the first reason they're attacking me. They're scared of me politically. The second reason is I was right. I said last Wednesday that unless we cleared up some of the conspiracy theories on social media by telling us the truth about who this young man was that stabbed to death those 3 little girls at that Taylor Swift party, unless we sorted it out, then I said I felt the country was on the verge of revolt. Well, we didn't clear up the mess, and we have had a revolt. So they secondly hate me because I was right.
What I find so dishonest by those who, again, seek to tar the people that have spoken about a very obvious issue, right? So say illegal border crossings, right? Now, very obviously, you can have an absolute passionate view on that issue. That does not mean that you endorse somebody breaking into the places where some of those people who illegally enter the country end up. This is what I find, again, the maliciousness in and around this. I mean, we can sit here for the next 8 minutes doing what I know you've done on your show in the UK and what we've done here, which is the riots are despicable. They are not acceptable. Everyone who's involved in the violence must be held to account, just like anyone else who does it. But that doesn't mean you can't have the view about, does a country have a border and are you allowed to police it?
Well, that's right. And one of the fears here, by Starmer saying we're going to crack down on the far right, we're going to use video imaging, one of the worries is that they actually try to suppress that debate even further, whilst effectively turning a blind eye to marauding gangs of masked Muslim young men walking around some of our cities in a very intimidatory way. Don't misunderstand me. Most of the thuggery has been young white males setting fire to things and behaving terribly. But it's not as if it's just one side that's at fault with all of this. Now, I really worry that Starmer may use this to try and suppress debate, to suppress free speech, to make it even harder to talk about these issues. And no one's spoken out more, Paul, than me about the cross-channel migrants, the young men, undocumented young males who ISIS themselves have said they'll put their operatives into our country through this route. And yet, when I was out there 3 years ago in the Channel and there were 2 young men that capsized from a dinghy, there I was physically putting them out of the English Channel. And the fact you think something's wrong doesn't mean you're subhuman.
100%, 100%. Let's talk quickly about the economies of the world that have all had a jitter in the past couple of days. And geez, what an absolute reminder about what is the choice before the American public here, where Kamala Harris, who just word salads her way through an explanation of inflation, would have no idea what lever to pull.
No, and of course what we're learning is that the Americans have been ever so slightly playing games with the economic figures as this election approaches, and as the truth got out towards the end of last week that the American economy is slowing, that the Fed have not reduced interest rates as quickly as they ought to. We've seen some precipitous downward moves on stock markets, Japan, of course, being perhaps the biggest example. But I think we're now entering a period of economic reality. We're living way beyond our means. Debt is much, much worse at a governmental, corporate and individual level than it was back in 2008. Growth in most countries is anemic. Growth even in America is not quite as good as people thought it was. And whilst I'm not on your show to make stock market predictions, I think we're in for a very, very bumpy autumn on the stock exchanges as this reality begins to bite.
I think so, and depending on the choices that are made in the next little while about whom that VP is, well, a whole bunch of stuff's going to happen in Chicago, let alone the court process revving up again against Trump. It'll be fascinating to watch. Thankfully, we get to talk to you and see you on GB News. Thank you, Nigel. Appreciate it.